Welcome back to Diagnosis Redefined. I'm your host, Erica Anderson, and in today's episode, we're going to be diving deep into the fascinating world of herbalism with Leslie Gossett Whalen. Leslie is an herbalist, she's a forager, an educator, and she is dedicated to connecting people to ancestral wisdom with the healing power of plants. Leslie and I met at the Kentucky Sustainable Living Homesteading and Preparedness event where we served on a health panel together. And that was when I knew I had to have her on this podcast because her approach to herbalism is very different from what I was used to. She has a very down-to-earth, data-driven approach that I could really relate to. And I just knew that she needed to be on this podcast because her approach is very refreshing and informative. And in today's episode, we talked about a lot of different subjects regarding herbalism, about how there's really no true magic pill. You know, lifestyle changes are very, very important. And she definitely believes in that, as well as essential oils. Are they really as healthy as they seem? And you're going to be really surprised by her answer as well. And then going into cold and flu season, what are her remedies for making sure that we're supporting our immune system? And what about those of us with autoimmune diseases? Are there immune modulating herbs that we should be using to protect us during this season? So this conversation is just packed with some really practical advice that you can take and use yourself. And I really hope you get a lot of value out of it. But before we jump into that conversation, I do want to tell you about something I'm really excited about, something that Dylan and I have been working on for January of 2025, and that is the Thrive Reset program at Chronically Healthy. And you may know at Chronically Healthy, we work one-on-one with our clients to help them develop their own personalized diet, identify food triggers, and really adopt lifestyle changes that are going to help address the root cause of their health issues. So for 2025, we developed a condensed group coaching version of this called the Thrive Reset to really just help you hit that reset button and jumpstart your health in 2025. So if you're looking to lose some weight, reduce inflammation, get your energy back, whatever it is, if you're feeling stuck in your health, this program can give you the tools and support you need. You're going to have 12 weeks of group coaching with Dylan and I. We are going to provide you with recipes, meal plans, over 50 different recipes, 10 resource guides. We're going to help you develop your own personalized diet that fits your body's unique needs, so no fad diets. We're going to help you identify those food triggers and sensitivities, and we're going to help you make necessary lifestyle changes to address stress and sleep and just overall well-being. So if you're wanting to hit that reset button for 2025 and thrive, visit chronicallyhealthyllc.xyz to sign up for the Thrive Reset program that is starting at the beginning of January. We will have more details coming out soon, but check out the website to see all of those details. That is chronicallyhealthyllc.xyz. And we're also going to put that link in the show notes. So check it out. And without further ado, let's hop into the conversation with Leslie. All right, Leslie, thank you so much for coming on and being willing to have a conversation with me here on the podcast, because we met at the Kentucky Sustainable Living Homesteading Preparedness event, and we were on a health panel together, which was really, really cool. But that was really kind of the moment where I heard you speak and I thought, I need to have her on the podcast, because the way you talk about, you are an herbalist, right?
Yes.
The way you talk about it is very, very data driven, very, very down to earth, and in a way that I hadn't heard before. And I thought it'd be really, really great to have you on the podcast, because I love to show people alternative ways to get to the place of healing and all the different modalities that they can use. And I think there's a lot of myths around herbalism that really needs to be dispelled, and I thought you would be the perfect person to do it. So thanks so much for coming on. And first of all, let's start off with, what exactly do you do? What do you call yourself, and how did you get here?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. So I am an herbalist, a forager, and an educator. And my whole mission in the world is to help people reconnect to ancestral wisdom, to start to understand health and well-being in this really, really simple, almost primal way. Like, without having to go and buy like $500 worth of supplements when you're just starting out on your health journey, to understand that there is food and medicine in the plants that grow all around us. So I'm specifically interested in local plants and helping people work with plants that grow right beside where they live because of so many reasons, but that can be a really powerful entry point, not only because you start to learn how to work with plants to support your healing, but because the act of getting outside is healing in and of itself. So I teach people how to identify and forage wild plants. I teach people how to make their own medicine. And I also do individual health consultations for people who are needing a little bit of extra support understanding how herbalism fits into their world and into their life.
Okay, yeah. And so, one of the big reasons, one of the things you said at the panel that we were on that I was really, really glad to hear was it's not just one thing, right, when it comes to our health. That, like, I mean, what you do is not the cure for everything. And, it's also how we live the rest of our lives. What's our sleep like? What's our nutrition like? And everything like that. And I was really glad to hear you say that because, to be honest, I have I have my own preconceptions about herbalism and herbalists, and it always seemed like anybody who was doing that was very much like, you have to use my tinctures. My tinctures are going to cure everything you have, and that's all you need. And so when I heard you say that, I was like, okay, let's have a conversation here. So first of all, let's start with that. Like, what myths would you love to dispel about herbalists? What are some of the things you hear all the time that people assume that you do that you really don't do?
Yeah, I mean, and it's the snake oil salesman, right? Like, there is no herb that is the end all be all cure all. I'm sorry. And if your foundational lifestyle is not in order, then herbs aren't really going to be of much help. And this is where I start with literally everybody. What is your stress level? What is your diet? Are you getting enough nutrition? Do you go outside? How long do you stare at screens? Do you drink enough water, and do you drink the right kind of water? And when we talk about these foundational elements of health, like, that is the crucial point. And if that's not in line, then there's not much that plants can do. And so, I also see it all the time. I see, and especially like now that herbalism has gotten a little bit popular, then you see the fad remedies. All of a sudden one day everybody's taking curcumin, right? And it's like the cure-all for literally everything, and everybody's on it. And, that it's just, not every herb is right for every person, and certainly not every like fad herb on the market is even necessarily beneficial, and we can kind of unpack why in a little bit. But herbs are absolutely not the cure-all, and there's no magic pill. Like, I know we all long for that magic pill, but if you're not willing to make a commitment to your health in the big picture and in the long term, like through all aspects of your life, then it's going to be really challenging to actually get to a state of optimal health, to even address the issues you have. And so, it works best when you're a person who's like really willing to commit to that health journey. And I'm sure you see this too in your own clients. Like, the more that people say, I'm going to prioritize understanding food and seeking out whole foods and cutting out the processed foods, that takes effort, because not only do you have to like go and seek out where you can buy these foods, then you have to prepare your own meals yourself. And then you have to bring food with you when you go places, because it's hard to find the food that serves you. You have to stop in the middle of your day and go outside. Maybe wake up early enough to go see the sunrise. You have to turn off your screens before bed, and it does require quite a significant lifestyle change. But, as an herbalist, like, I can't get you there. Nothing that I do. You have to take this on yourself. And you also have to understand that plants will have a role after you've gotten your foundations in order. And so like the very first myth being there's not a cure-all. And maybe the second myth being that people think herbs work the same way that pharmaceuticals work. You know, oh, well, instead of getting this prescription pill and taking a pill once or twice a day, let me get an herbal pill from the grocery store and then take that once or twice a day. And there's so much wrong with that. And like, not only because there's no like straight swap outs, you can't just say, oh, this herb is going to replace something. Well, you know, there is, like I said, there's no magic pill. So it doesn't matter what you're taking, even if it's a pharmaceutical, if your health isn't in order, it's not going to last. The effects aren't going to last. Mm-hmm. But then beyond that, the types of things that are sold in like a conventional grocery store are not necessarily medicine that's bioavailable, meaning like your body can't necessarily use what's in those capsules. And this goes into a whole thing about phytochemistry, which in brief, when you're working with plant medicine, the idea is that in the plant's life process, it's creating chemicals. So it starts with photosynthesis, right? It's taking in sunlight, it's taking in water, it's creating food for itself. And this is a chemical equation that you can like write out. And there are leftover molecules, and the plant uses those pieces to create other chemicals that protect itself. This is called its secondary metabolism. So the plant is trying to defend itself against predation, against microbial infections, and it's trying to attract pollinators. Those chemicals that the plant creates are the chemicals that act as medicine in the human body, but only after they've been broken down. So they're all contained in the cell wall of the plant. And then the practice of making plant medicine is understanding how to extract those constituents out of the plant cells and make them into a form where when you ingest them, your body can then utilize those. And so like when you just take a plant, dry it, powder it, put it in a capsule, it has not been broken down. It's not bioavailable. You're not getting very much medicine. And beyond that, different phytochemicals, you know, require different liquids to extract. Like some are water soluble, some are alcohol soluble, some are oil soluble or only soluble in vinegar, meaning they dissolve in those liquids. Those liquids draw them out. So if you're going to the store and you go to the vitamin aisle and you find a tea bag of milk thistle seed and it says, this is great for liver support. Funny thing is that the constituents in milk thistle seed that help protect and purify the liver are only extractable in alcohol. So if you make a tea out of that, you're actually not receiving the medicine. And so it's like a waste of money. So, you know, I would just caution people that herbalism is like more, while it's a simple thing, it's more complex than maybe what you're going to see in the grocery store or the newest fad on the internet. And to just proceed with caution by following those trends, because a lot of them you're really just going to throw your money away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to hit on here that I really like that you pointed out. And first of all, when it came to, you know, foundations and people not having their foundations of health set up first, you know, the basics, the nutrition, the sleep, the stress, and everything like that, and how those sometimes what people will do is instead of getting those foundations set, they'll want to jump straight into a natural remedy, which is great. But then when they do, they go, oh, see, it doesn't work.
Exactly.
It doesn't. And it's like, well, it can't overcome a bad diet. It can't overcome the, you know, working a night shift. It cannot do that. And I think that is a very common thing when it comes to, you know, with like more of the like conventional supplements as well. Everyone's just like, oh, you're just making expensive urine and that sort of thing. And it's like, well, if that's the only thing you're doing, then yes, you're not going to see much result. Absolutely. And then also this mentality of a pill for every ill, but natural.
Right.
Right. Which
right.
We all want the easy answer. 100%. I wish there was a silver bullet for whatever condition people are going through, right? Like whatever chronic illness you're dealing with, everyone wants to go, oh, this is the thing that's causing it, and I'm going to use this one thing to fix it. But our bodies are so much more complicated than that. And so the answer isn't going to be easy. And if anyone is trying to sell you their silver bullet, it's a red flag, right?
100%.
So
Yes.
I'm really glad you brought up those points as well. Now, to go into what you were talking about with the different extractions, and so some of the things are just not properly extracted that you're getting off of the shelf, and so you're not going to be able to absorb it. Your body's not going to be able to use it properly. Let's talk about some of the fad things that we're seeing that people are getting really excited about and what they can look for to make sure that they're getting a good product. The first thing that came to mind was like adaptogenic mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, that sort of thing. There's mushroom coffees out there, like mushroom powders, like everyone is selling their mushrooms. So how do you know, what can you look for on the label to make sure, is this something that your body can even use?
That's a great question, and one I get the most often, especially with like the coffees and the powder supplements. So what you want to look for with medicinal mushroom medicine is a double or triple extracted mushroom. So most fungus and also lichens, like Usmia lichen, which is very common in the herbal medicine world, require an extraction in both water and alcohol, because part of their medical constituents are water soluble, part are alcohol soluble. And then for many of them, you actually also have to apply heat in order to get them to extract out, because think about like a fungus, it's a little bit tougher. It's going to be harder to draw those out of the plant. Well, not the plant, out of the fungus. And so looking for an extraction. So if you just are getting a mushroom powder where they've taken a mushroom, dried it up, powdered it, and are serving it to you, for many medicinal mushrooms, your body can't really use it. Now, there is an exception with turkey tail mushroom in particular. It's amazing at prebiotic support. It has a lot of inulin, and that is water soluble. So like a turkey tail tea, say you're going to dissolve that powder in a hot water, you will get some digestive benefit from that. But for the other common things like reishi mushroom, lion's mane, things like that, you really want to look for a double extraction. And so that's either going to show up in like a tincture, a liquid tincture, or some companies now will actually sell the freeze-dried powdered extraction. So it's still a powder, so you still have that convenient form to take it in, but it's actually been extracted already. So it's as opposed to just being a mushroom that's dried. The other thing that I see people, looking at, and this is a big conversation in the herbalism world, and not every herbalist agrees, but traditionally the medicine of mushrooms would have come from the fruiting body of the mushroom. And then a lot of companies are selling mycelium only. So the mycelium is the underground part of the fungus that we don't see. And so a lot of herbalists say that you want to look for supplements that include both the fruiting body and the mycelium, instead of just the mycelium, because like historically and traditionally, we've seen a lot of benefit from the fruiting body, and we don't really know if those same benefits come from mycelium only. So just a few things to look for.
Yeah, that's super, super helpful. I know I've seen double extracted with some of these mushroom powders on the label and everything, but I had never heard of like triple extracted. So what's the triple extracted?
The heat, the application
The
of
heat. Oh, gotcha.
And not
Okay.
everybody will label it that. Like, I use heat to extract when I'm making medicine, but I don't necessarily call it triple extracted. I've seen a lot of herbalists start to call it triple extracted. Sometimes not necessarily for mushrooms, but maybe also for other plants that need it. They might do also a vinegar extraction and add that in, or they might do a cold water extraction and a hot water extraction. So, it's really what you want to focus on is, has it been both water and alcohol extracted?
Okay. Okay, great. Now, another common one, and I know we had talked about this before, so people may be really surprised by your answer and there may be some hearts broken, but where do essential oils fall into when it comes to herbalism? Are they really as beneficial and safe as everyone says they are?
Yeah, it's a great question. And maybe I'll start with kind of like a broad understanding of what all these terms are. When you're looking, say you go to like a health food store and you're in the herbal section, you might see like tincture or alcohol-free tincture or essential oil or infused oil. So what does all that mean, and where do essential oils fit in there? So really what we're talking about is what liquid it's been extracted in. So if you want to get really technical, a tincture is alcohol, okay? An acetum is a vinegar extraction. When you see these things that are labeled alcohol-free tinctures, that's actually extracted in vegetable glycerin, and its real name is a glycerite. And the trick about those, just as a little side note before we come back to essential oils, is that not everything is extractable in glycerin. So it's not necessarily a one-for-one switch. If you're like, oh, I really need like a burdock root, but I don't want to take an alcohol tincture, so I'm going to get the glycerin. Well, guess what? It doesn't extract very well in glycerin. So you're not really going to get a lot of medicine. And that's true for many classes of herbs that don't extract out in glycerin. So you can't just switch out one for one for an alcohol-free tincture. We can go more into that. But then we have like infused oils, which is when an herb is soaked in an oil or a fat and then strained out. Now, what an essential oil is it's one of the byproducts of a steam distillation. So you take a lot of herbs, you put them in a still, you heat the water and you run the steam back through cold. And at that point, it separates into essential oil and a water that's called a hydrosol. And one thing about essential oils is that it takes a massive amount of plant material to make a tiny amount of essential oils. So, 5 pounds of lavender might create like 1/8 of an ounce of essential oil. And so, number one, it's not incredibly sustainable, and you're wasting a lot of the other plant properties. But what has happened now is that you have extracted only the volatile oils. That's the chemical name for these constituents that come out. So all of the other beneficial constituents in the plant are not in that essential oil that is evaporated out. And so when you have an essential oil, it's a highly, highly concentrated oil that's from the plant. And it's called a volatile oil because it's chemically not stable, it's volatile. And I personally do not work with essential oils at all in my practice. The reason being that I've found them to be very irritating to most people. Topically, absolutely. You have to dilute them quite significantly. And then I've known people to take them internally as well, which I don't recommend just because of how harsh it is on your entire system. But beyond that, there are a lot of studies coming out that show that certain essential oils, and especially like lavender and tea tree oil, are endocrine disruptors. So that means it's going to mess with our hormones, our hormonal balance, our body's ability to produce and regulate hormones. And, especially they were seeing that in prepubescent girls who had a heavy exposure to lavender essential oil, that puberty was starting sooner. And so that's very concerning to me because a lot of people I work with already have disrupted endocrine systems, right? All of the toxins we're exposed to in everyday life disrupts it enough. So why do you want to add anything on top of that? And so if you want, if you're a person who maybe uses essential oils in one of those diffusers because you like how it is in the air, what you can actually do is work with the whole plant instead. So you're going to get the volatile oils in addition to the other chemical constituents in the plant. And the wonderful and amazing thing about plants is that all of their constituents are synergistic and they work together. So a lot of the compounds that can irritate when they're on their own, there are counter compounds that soothe that when they're all together. And so it's a more balanced equation. And so, for example, one thing I love to do is to put lavender or other highly aromatic herbs in a bowl and then pour boiled water and then head over the bowl, towel over your head in the bowl. You can breathe in that steam and you are receiving the essential oils along with all of the other compounds in the plant. So it's a lot better for your body, easier for your body to utilize. You can do the same thing, if you apply essential oils topically, use the whole herb. And it just gives you a lot more of the benefit of the plant. And also, you're not wasting so much plant material in the process of making that medicine.
It makes a lot of sense because, I mean, nature has, perfectly it's perfectly wrapped up and balanced, and of
Yes.
course we have to try to extract something, and
Yeah.
and everything that we do as humans, it's like, oh, if this is good, a ton of it in concentrated form
Right.
must be awesome. And it's like,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
there's a reason why it comes in this package, and
Yes.
we need we need
Precisely.
to be able to use that package.
Yes.
um Now you mentioned, so instead of using these oils, use the whole herbs, and that, I mean, just as a person who has not done any of this before, what does that look like exactly? So, like, for example, tea tree oil is often used for, like, as an antifungal, right?
Yeah.
How would you use something like that topically as the whole herb? Like, what does that look like?
You could actually find an infused oil of tea tree, meaning, or you could make it yourself. So, meaning, like, you get the plant material and it's very easy to make an oil infusion. You would fill a jar about halfway full with the plant you're working with, the rest of the way full with a high quality oil like avocado or high quality olive oil, and then you just let that sit for 4 weeks. After that, you strain it out, and now the oil has taken on the properties of the plant material. To make an extra potent oil in this way, you can, before you add the oil, you can add a splash of 100 proof alcohol to the jar, shake it up, let it sit overnight, and then add the oil on top. And that will help pull out some of the alcohol soluble properties of the plant if there are any in the plant you're working with. But you can also seek out, there's so many like independent small scale herbalists that are making these preparations that you can buy from them versus buying your bottle of essential oil. And sometimes it's even going to be less expensive than essential oil, depending on what plant you're working with. And then you can just apply
Yeah,
that topically. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, wow. All right.
Yep.
Well, I did not know that, so that's very
Yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Um, because yeah, again, like I'm very new to any of this. So yeah, when you say like, oh, just put it topically, I just like imagine just like laying some lavender on you. I'm like, I don't think that's what she means.
That would be nice though.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Um, so what would you suggest for people who are, if they are looking for an herbalist, what qualifications, like how do you know that who you're working with really knows what they're talking about?
Yeah, I would see if they have free material on the internet where you can listen to them. Maybe they have a YouTube channel. Maybe they do. I know a lot of herbalists do like free videos on Instagram or TikTok or any of these social media channels. But just see what material they have out there. Start listening to them. Start seeing kind of like what they're doing in the world. Maybe you can go take a class with them. Maybe you can join a call with them. It's really important like that you find somebody who resonates with you, because herbalists are not all the same and they don't all take the same approach. Like I'm talking about not using essential oils. A lot of herbalists use essential oils heavily. So it's not like we all agree. So the one thing is to really feel that personal connection and find that personal approach. And then in terms of like credentialing, it's very interesting because there's not like a license for an herbalist in the United States. Many programs that you take and graduate from will award you a certificate that calls you a master herbalist, but none of those have the same criteria. So like the first program that I got a master herbalist certificate from, I laughed because I was like, I'm not a master herbalist. I've been doing this 2 years. Like, how can you give me this certificate? And so there is a body that you can pay to take a test and then join. It's called the American Herbalist Guild. And many clinical herbalists do this to kind of like prove that they have credentials in line with their colleagues who have to sort of vouch for them in their practice. But I personally really like the freedom to not have to be licensed or registered with anything. I'm in full support of that in the world of health. And so, in that being said, it can be hard because a lot of really, really excellent herbalists aren't going to have that qualification. after their name because they're choosing not to participate in it. So the only way you can know is to talk to these people, to seek out their material, to ask them a few questions and kind of see if they do have any nuance to what they're talking about. And like we said before, if they immediately promise you that they can fix your problems, or if they have the cure all for you, then run the other direction.
Yes. Yeah. Use your critical thinking and common sense
Exactly.
when talking to people. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, so a lot of people in my audience are dealing with a chronic illness, autoimmune diseases, that sort of thing. And so what are some herbal remedies that you would recommend for different things? Particularly, I'm thinking like anti-inflammatory. As you said, curcumin is the new hotness. And it has anti-inflammatory properties, which is why everyone is taking it. But what is a good way to get a true herbal anti-inflammatory? Is there a certain way it needs to be extracted? Like, what should people look for?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that every single person is different. And so this is actually one of the more complicated aspects of herbalism that, like maybe turmeric works for you, but maybe it doesn't actually work for me. And so there has to be a little bit of consideration into your individual being and looking at, there's a few things you can look at. You can look at which of your organ systems like need extra support right now, because different herbs can have affinities for certain organ systems, right? So that might clue you into, ooh, I want to try the anti-inflammatory that has like an affinity for the skin, or I actually need one that's more for like nerve pain and nerve issues. You also want to think about your makeup, your constitution is what we call it. Like, do you run cold? Do you run dry? Do you run hot? Do you run wet? Looking at the sort of collective state of the things that are going on in your body, and can you identify any of these conditions? So, if you're extremely hot all the time, if your skin is red and irritated, you tend toward rashes, you might have a warm constitution, right? If you have excess mucus all the time, if you're salivating a lot, if you're having digestive issues, then you might run wet. And so looking at seeking out herbs that are kind of going to do the opposite of that. So maybe you want to, if you're running wet, you maybe want to seek the drying herbs when you're looking at these. So, there's a few things to consider, and it's not like one herb works for everybody. But if you're not sure which way to go, too, you can always try something and see how you feel. And my recommendation is to never try more than one thing at a time, because you won't know which thing is having the impact. But actually, whole turmeric. So curcumin is a single extract. It's a single constituent that's been extracted out. And so my preference is much more to use turmeric in its whole form. And interestingly enough, turmeric is and the constituents in turmeric that have anti-inflammatory properties are very, very fat soluble. And a lot of people aren't taking it with extracted in fat or with fat in their diet. You can also take it with black pepper to help potentiate it, so it makes it a little bit more powerful, a little bit more bioavailable. So turmeric and ginger together have a very synergistic property. So even if you make a tea and then take it with milk, or you can take your tincture with some coconut oil, or you can find an oil extraction. But you can also look into willow bark and some of the other plants in this family. So aspirin is actually derived from one of the constituents in willow bark. And so for some people that does work really well. There's licorice root, and that's especially helpful if you have digestive pain, digestive issues, because it also has an affinity for the digestive system, and you can kind of go on and on in this world of anti-inflammatory, pain relief, and especially when we get into the nervous system and understanding where your pain and inflammation stems from, because if you're talking about nerve issues, then we can start looking at passion flower and skullcap, things like California poppy. There's so many things, and it can be overwhelming, but the first thing to do is kind of narrow down like, what are my issues? Like, are they muscular? Are they nerves? Is it a certain organ system? And then starting to experiment, with one of these. Now, I will say too, back to the foundations, that I find a lot of people that I work with who are struggling with intense pain and inflammation are not getting outside and getting that circadian signaling. So natural sunlight, and then also like red light therapy can be incredibly powerful. So even before trying these herbal interventions, are we accessing, like, are we hydrated? Are we getting our light regulated? Things like that would be first in line.
Absolutely. I love when you mentioned, certain things that, turmeric and ginger go together and they work synergistically, because it really lets, if you look at traditional cooking and
Yes,
traditional dishes, it's like they knew.
exactly.
Ginger and turmeric are almost always together in a recipe. Black pepper and turmeric are almost always together. It's like food is really medicine, and
Absolutely.
ancestrally our ancestors knew that, and they were putting these things together. Yes, it tasted good, great, but it also truly was medicine in so many ways, and we ignore that now when we make our food most of the time. But if you look at traditional dishes in different cultures, they put things together for a reason, and they knew
Absolutely.
you needed this to be able to absorb that.
And the turmeric is always made with fat. It's like so common. It's cooked
Yes.
in ghee or it's made with milk. Like,
Hmm.
it's just a thing that humans have known. And I actually made a post about this today, because a lot of the herbs that we start to turn to as we approach the holiday season, like, are so appropriate seasonally, medicinally. So like our cinnamon, our ginger, our cloves, our nutmeg, our star anise, our allspices, those all are warming, they're immune boosting, they're antimicrobial. They're like the exact things that we actually need as we're going into these colder months. And, intuitively, like humans, like all of the flavors of the season just are made of those things. Like, it's still
Yeah.
around, and it's so beautiful to see that still
Yeah.
happening in our society, even if people don't understand why they're doing it.
Yes. We gotta keep these traditions. There's a reason why our
Yes,
ancestors were doing this. Now we
exactly.
just like it. We just enjoy it, right? But
Yeah,
no, there was
exactly.
a purpose to
Yeah.
this.
Yes.
I'm glad you mentioned too about the seasons and everything, because and immune boosting properties and everything like that, because it's flu season. Everyone is worried about, getting sick and what can they do to boost their immune systems. And then also there's going to be a follow-up question to think about too with this, because if you have an autoimmune disease, you don't want your immune system is usually on high alert anyway. So what would you suggest as far as anything, which we know the foundational stuff, right? We got to have our nutrition right.
Yep.
We're heading into sugar season. Like,
Yeah.
that's what this is. That's
Yes.
going to tank your immune system. But if there's anything on the herbal side of things that could also help through this season,
Yeah,
what
I
would that
like
be?
to take like a threefold approach to what we call sick season in terms of herbs. Like, once you really are, I'm serious, like, stop with the sugar and the alcohol. But beyond that, the nutritive herbs are going to be really helpful. So that means the ones that are really high in vitamin and mineral content. And two of my favorites that are really simple are nettles. So that's stinging nettle if you're buying the cultivated herb, and then dandelion, all parts of the plant. So these are both full of vitamins and minerals, and your body needs all of these things. These are the building blocks to your immune system, the building blocks to cellular health. And a lot of us are going into the season depleted, and especially depending on where your diet is, even if you're growing your own food or buying organic, local food, a lot of this food is less mineral dense than it would have been in our great grandparents' generation. So, what are we doing to make up for that lack? And wild foods are an incredible source of nutrients. They're much more nutrient dense than cultivated foods. And when we get into the world of herbs, it's, drinking herbal teas. So that vitamins and minerals are water soluble. So any good quality herbal tea and it doesn't even matter which herbs, you're going to start getting vitamins and minerals out of it. This is a great way to stay hydrated during this season as well. But also mineral vinegars. So vinegars excel in extracting vitamins and minerals out of the plants. And so to place your herbs in a jar, again, half full, the rest of the way with apple cider vinegar, let it sit in a cool, dark place for 4 weeks, and then strain it out. And now you have a wild multivitamin and multimineral. And so you can mix that with raw honey, you can mix it with molasses, also excellent source of minerals. And you can take like a spoonful twice a day. And that's really going to start giving your body everything it needs to really be healthy as we go into this season. The second part of the herbal approach would be to look into some long-term, like preventative and supportive herbs. And there's several approaches. You can support your body's stress response through adaptogenic herbs. And these would be things like the reishi mushroom that we were talking about. You can support your nervous system as a whole, right? So reishi also has an affinity for the nervous system. You can support your immune function. So astragalus root is great for this. Reishi is too. Reishi is actually good on all these levels. Ashwagandha is another one. But these are very gentle, so they're not necessarily immune stimulants. They would be considered immune modulators. And so now a lot of times people who are dealing with autoimmune issues can handle immune modulators, and it doesn't seem to have negative consequences. Again, this is very individual, so that's not necessarily true for everybody. And you probably want to work with an herbalist specifically if you're going to start working with immune herbs and you're dealing with an autoimmune issue. But these are not like the echinacea, right? So echinacea is an immune stimulant. So I'm talking about milder, long-term herbs that you can dose every day. So a medicinal dose is either 3 cups of tea spread throughout the day, or it's 1 or 2 droppers full 3 times a day. And when I talk about a dropper full, you have your little dropper bottles, and you are going to squeeze it and then let the liquid fill the dropper. And that's a dropper full. So again, this is another misconception is people are like, well, I took it once. Well, that's not a medicinal dose. Herbs need to be in your body regularly. And then the third aspect of herbs during this season are the herbs that you can turn to if you've been exposed to a sickness or you start to feel the first signs of getting sick. Then you can kind of turn to, they're a little bit more aggressive, even though they're not necessarily actually aggressive. They're just going to be a little bit more intense than the herbs that I mentioned before. And those include things that a lot of people know about, like fire cider, which maybe is something that's more in the mainstream. Fire cider is just a vinegar extraction of plants mixed with honey. It includes like onion and garlic and turmeric and ginger and horseradish, and that can be really helpful because of its antimicrobial properties. This is where your elderberry syrup comes in, so that's something that's very known in the world, and in fact, one of the few things that is properly extracted on the shelves. But you can start taking elderberry syrup, if you think you're getting sick, even up to like 5 spoonfuls a day. This is when you can start taking your echinacea root tincture. Now, for people who have an autoimmune condition, echinacea is an interesting one because a lot of herbal protocols for autoimmune disorders use echinacea and it's helpful. But then in about like 10% of cases, it's harmful. And you don't really know that until you try it. And you have to work with somebody to know how to try it, to not get yourself in a bad situation. But, you can do more things like yarrow tincture would be a good alternative. It's a little bit milder. It's not an immune stimulant, but it does have some antibacterial and antiviral properties that can be supportive. Same thing with elderflower, has antibacterial, antiviral properties, but it's not going to stimulate your immune system quite like echinacea will. And so just like having some of these things on hand at home for if you do start to get sick And then in the meantime, you're really just supporting, you're building up your body's natural defenses, you're helping your body be able to do the thing that it knows how to do. And, you know, one little caveat about symptoms is that our symptoms are actually not caused by the sickness, they're caused by our immune system. And it's the wisdom of our body that's happening. And when we just reach for some over-the-counter medications and cut that completely off, we're only harming ourselves. You know, so I'm a big fan of like, run the fever, because the fever is needed. You know, trust your body, like it knows what to do. And then you can use herbs to kind of help your body do those things and bring those things to fruition. And that's how herbs work a little differently, because we're not really just cutting it off or suppressing a symptom like we would be with OTC medicines. We're actually kind of supporting the body. You know, if we have mucus, we're not trying to stop the cough. We're trying to expectorate and get it all out. You know, we're trying to finish the process. So, yeah.
Helping your body with what it's already trying to do.
Exactly.
Basically.
Exactly. Exactly. Because your body knows. I mean, yeah.
Yep. And we're just conditioned to feel like we need to suppress it. We need to, that you're right, that the symptoms are the sickness, and it is not. It is your body's response to that sickness. And our bodies are amazing.
Yes.
Even though, you know, I know some people listening are really struggling with some really tough things, and you can go through days where you just really are mad at your body because it never it seems to be working, right? But those are messages your body is trying to tell you, and it's trying to tell you what it needs. And so I do love how you are using these herbs to support these processes that your body already has. You know, the wisdom that your body already has, you're just trying to support it.
Absolutely. And it can be incredibly uncomfortable. And I think that's part of why we want it to just end, because, you know, especially in modern society, we're not used to having to experience discomfort. Like, we live in a very luxurious world where you can like push a button or do a thing and like whatever's wrong will go away, or so they tell us. But, you know, the experience of sitting in discomfort and being with those pains and those thoughts, like a lot of times in my experience for my own self, you know, that's part of the healing process, is having to actually face those things and breathe into those things. And instead of like pushing them away, because a lot of times our resistance is making it worse versus our surrender into like, this is awful, this sucks, but it's happening to me and I have to be here with it. And so there's like an almost spiritual aspect that you can bring into the healing path in that way.
What's that phrase? What you resist persists?
Exactly. Yeah, it's real.
It is. It is very real. Well, Leslie, I'm sitting here taking notes. I'm of everything you've been saying, and I'm definitely gonna do my best to look into this some more and try to apply this in my own life for sure. But how can people get a hold of you? How can they work with you? Because it does sound like personalization is key, and how you personalize things to everybody. So how can they get in touch with you and learn more?
So my website is schooloferthandawe.com. Awe is AWE. I'm also on Instagram as School of Earth and Awe, and Facebook. I have a Patreon page, so you can subscribe. I do monthly lessons, videos, all sorts of things over there. And then you can also check out my YouTube. I just started a YouTube. Well, I'll be offering more free material if you're just wanting to learn, and reach out to me there.
Great. And then for people who are wanting to work one-on-one and do consults with you, is there like a certain
It's on my
area?
website. Yeah,
It's
if
on
you go
your
on my
website, gotcha.
website and go under consultations, you can find the information there, and you can just message me from there, and happy to talk to you. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you again for coming on here and sharing your expertise. Would love to have another conversation. I'm sure we could just go on and on.
Yes.
But I think this is a great introduction to herbalism for a lot of people who may have not known anything about it, or maybe had a bad taste in their mouth about it and wasn't sure about it, thought it was really woo-woo. So I really appreciate you breaking these things down for everybody into practical ways.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to chat with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation with Leslie. I hope you found it as insightful as I did. I was truly just taking a ton of notes, trying to soak as much in as I could. And if you're thinking about jumping into herbs and seeing how it can help your health and support your health, I truly encourage you seeking expert advice through people like Leslie and trying to find someone who can really personalize it for you so that you're not just following a fad and just doing what your body truly needs. And if you love this episode, don't forget to share it with a friend who might find it helpful. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our future conversations. We have more exciting topics and expert guests lined up, and I don't want you to miss it. And until next time, please remember, your health is yours to define. Stay empowered. Take care.